Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to today's ISC Squared Think Tank. Today's program is brought to you by the fine folks at F5 Networks. We're going to be talking about planning your work and working your plan, continuing the move to the cloud. We've talked a lot in the past about kind of getting started in the cloud adoption space. Well, that time's long past, and we're now deep into moving workloads, either directly forklifting them up into the IaaS space or adoption of SaaS services. And today we're joined by a couple of great folks here, one from ISC Squared Zone. It's Ryan Good, who's the Senior Manager of Technical Operations within ISC Squared. And so he'll be bringing kind of the insider's view as to how they manage this. And also we're joined by Tom Thomas, who's the Director of Enterprise Architecture from F5, just a couple miles away as the crow flies from where I'm sitting right now. So both these guys have some solid experience in this space, and we've got them live for the next hour or so. So please, as we continue our dialogue, make liberal use of that questions area, and I'll get as many of them answered as possible throughout our dialogue today. And then we'll try to answer anything that we don't get to out of band after the session is ended. I want to remind you all also, we've got some links and some attachments over in the attachments and links section, including a hidden ROI of cloud-friendly security ebook, which I think you'll find very interesting. And don't forget the ISC Squared Security Congress Call for Speakers link is also down there and active. So if you've got a bright idea or some interesting insights you'd like to share with the broader international community, please don't hesitate to submit your abstracts and such for that, because we'd love to host you. Well, with that, gentlemen, let's go ahead and kick off. Pardon me. I was doing a little research ahead of this and came across a couple of slides that I thought were very interesting, or a couple of graphs rather, that were very interesting. And this one in particular shows a lot of growth overall in cloud adoption. You can see, for example, that big purple band, folks, there that is the growth in the SaaS space, right? We've seen that really ramp up. We've also seen some private cloud activity kind of start to build too. And that big green bar at the bottom that's declining is the continued pressure, I think, being placed on our traditional on-prem and in data center spaces. We're just getting out of the data center business as companies, and well, even some telcos now. We've seen Verizon sell off 30 some odd data centers. So I'm curious, Tom, are you kind of experiencing this kind of transition away still at these kinds of levels in the customer base that you're seeing?
I would say we're seeing the same kind of thing as more and more companies try to move the value proposition up the stack. It's not to say the data center is going away, but as the business demands more nimbleness, more flexibility and agility, I think we see more and more companies trying to drop the credit card, if you will, and turn on the business services in real time, which is why we're seeing more and more folks lean towards the SaaS versus the typical on-prem hardware. Now, that doesn't mean everything is going SaaS. There's still some intellectual property. There's still some components or verticals that it makes sense to keep it closer to home. But I think this trend is going to continue forward for quite a while.
Give me some ideas. Some of those industries that are still kind of clinging to the data center, if you were. You mentioned some specific kind of use cases. But is it just the crown jewels they don't want to get out of their sight, or are there technical limitations to some of this?
I would say a lot of it is more probably on the technical limitation side. So if you look into spaces potentially like retail, some of the organizations that have been around for 100 years or that kind of time frame where they've really grown their people internally and organically over time, and they're not, let's say, as new as some of the folks that have grown up in the last 10 or 20 years where the internet has always been there, they will have a skill gap in some spaces, and there will be a change management issue to overcome for some of these larger, older organizations versus the Facebooks and the Apples and the companies that have been built in a much more recent time. So it doesn't mean as they continue to grow, the growth curve won't change, where they too are forced by the next generation of technologists into the cloud, because it's where they will grow up as kids and as young professionals and academics. So it's just a matter of time before everybody gets there. But again, there's going to be spaces like retail, title and escrow, some of the old companies that just have to go with the technology curve of their physical staff, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. Ryan, what's your kind of take on this? I know we've had Chuck and others on the program from ISC Square talking about the move into cloud and software as a service functions. I know whenever I'm having calls with you guys, there's a lot of Office 365 activity, right, to coordinate and such with Skype and everything else. How are you guys viewing this, and what, if anything, are you deciding to keep closer to home?
I mean, for us, we're really focused on getting rid of mission-critical metal and making sure that our applications are always available and that we're we're able to support our internal clients as they're being more and more distributed across the globe. So for us, as we've moved to the cloud, it's kind of brought apart a sense that you need to make sure that your foundations and what you're doing at an operational level are there. And I think a lot of companies get kind of stuck in their jump to the cloud, because when you start to get started, you're kind of looking at, what's my Cmdb maturity level? What processes do I have surrounding my Cmdb? And do I have enough intelligence as far as what I've gathered on my own infrastructure to be able to make that jump to the cloud in a safe manner? And I think sometimes you get kind of stuck in this hybrid cloud situation where you kind of got one foot in both worlds, and because you didn't necessarily understand the relations between all of your assets in both systems, you kind of got stuck. And I think that's what's, in some cases, kind of slowing the movement out of the traditional data center.
So, on the hybrid cloud bit, I think we're all there because we're all moving a little bit. So it's a transition, right? I think. But Tom, I think you had a point you wanted to throw in there as well.
I did, and one of the things, much like he's saying, is it's also about how many antique applications do we have? How much legacy do we have? The creators are no longer in the building, and we're afraid we can't recompile it and push the workload into some other data center because we don't know what the integrations are. We don't know what the firewall rules are. We don't know what zones they sit in. We don't know, is the data customer critical, and we're legally bound not to let it go. So I think it's not just about our people, but it's also about, do our people still know what we have? And if we don't, that's going to be a major barrier of resistance, because we're afraid that our big COTS packages have been running for the last 20 years on-prem. How are they going to function out there? Can we migrate all that data and all those integrations over the cloud without stopping our business from functioning? Because we know at the end of the day, we can't just turn the lights off for a weekend and turn them back on Monday. The company has to run 24/7, 365.
I don't think I've ever heard the term antique used with an application in IT, but I guess it just shows how long I've been in this game that maybe I'm the antique here in this equation. You guys are talking about, both of you have mentioned kind of the skills issue, right? So as we start to make this move, I know I've talked to a lot of security professionals who are very excited about some of the services offered in the cloud, be it identity federation or very granular access management or enhanced logging, all these other things that people have been talking about as net benefits, but it comes with a cost of learning. And a traditional guy that drops his old, back in the day, you drop your Windows NT server disk in and install onto bare metal, that skill set is not needed anymore. Ryan, obviously speaking a little bit on from the ISC Squared side, but what kinds of skill gaps are you seeing that may be slowing this adoption or this move?
I think in some cases there's a cloud equivalent to what you have on premise, but it's handled in a different way. And sometimes you have to approach things differently. Storage, for example, is handled drastically differently. So I think what happens with a lot of companies is they'll have their storage engineer kind of start mapping out what the storage is going to look like in the cloud, and then they go, wow, this is a lot different. And while you're in that situation, part of the problem is that you're having to have people and skills for those both worlds. And I think it's such a common pitfall that happens once a migration begins, because you start building out into the cloud. But while that's happening, I've still got all of this legacy infrastructure, legacy applications that I have to support. And I have to make sure that I budget the O&M so that I'm not incurring any technical debt whether that's people, process, or technology, as I start to build out to the cloud.
You know, I think that brings up another point you touched on a few moments ago, kind of knowing what you have in that inventory. And you mentioned the Cmdb. It seems like that gets easier when you move to the cloud about knowing what you've got, because you're going to get an itemized bill every month, whereas you may have, to Tom's point, an antique application parked away somewhere that's been running for decades that you've all but forgotten about. Tom, do you think that that's one of the benefits of of moving to the cloud as opposed to on-prem, and could be a good valid business case, is just that enhanced visibility over the financials?
Oh, absolutely. And I would even go one step further to say a migration to the cloud forces you to do spring cleaning. It forces you to say, what are all those bare metal servers we've been running forever, and we keep paying for the air conditioning, the power, the networking, the disk replacement, the NIC replacement, to find out that really nobody uses them anymore. We're just keeping them powered on because no one's taken the time to do an inventory. Or we may find out there's a bunch of inefficient processes residing on those antique applications that if we migrate to a SaaS or a modern day platform, we can actually gain additional business value, flexibility, and increase our bottom line by getting out of the old way we did things and now taking that inventory and doing it the way industry does based on current trends and best practices.
You know, I got another slide that I think speaks a little bit to this growth, and this is some Gartner projections. And if you look at 2017, which we just closed out here, $260 billion in estimated cloud spend, and by 2020, they're thinking that number is going to be $411 billion. You know, again, we're going to see this ramp up. We're spending more and more on this from a service perspective. And to Ryan, your point, it's converting from CapEx to OpEx, right? Is that a compelling story, Ryan, for folks that you speak to?
I mean, cost is part of it, but I think in some cases, if you're not planning your capacity or understanding what your objectives are, you may not really acquire that cost reduction benefit that you thought you were going to acquire. That really requires planning, capacity management, and automation to really drive that cost reduction home. What I do think that we're starting to see as we move into more SaaS and stuff like that is we're getting our practitioners, we're really aligning them to the business. So I think gone are the days where we're having people that focus purely on certain pieces of technology and are the SMEs really for that portion of the infrastructure. And it's really about mapping what we're doing on the technical process side so that it supports and adds value to the business processes.
I couldn't agree.
Well, Tom, I want to go ahead, Tom. I was going to come back to you because I know you're an enterprise architect at heart. You've been doing this sort of stuff a long time. That capacity planning, essentially, in the old days, we would have to overbuy hardware to anticipate growth. Now, with all the elasticity and such that's available to us, doesn't that become a little easier, or is the upfront effort just as onerous?
I'd say absolutely a lot easier. And there's even a couple of the components I'd want to be very mindful, because we always focus on the cost, but it's not just about the cost. One of the things we've got to remember as we migrate to the cloud or SaaS or one of the other flavors thereof is what are the business needs? What are the actual performance requirements of the business, and for what period of time? Is it Black Friday and you need those system resources literally for a weekend? Or do you truly need those resources all year long, in which case you're paying for the bare metal every single day to be running, versus you elastically expand, you get through the holiday season or through your marketing campaign or through your registration or your voting, whatever that spike is, and shut it back down. And the other thing we got to remember when we're talking from the business perspective of why go cloud, what's your time to deliver? What does it take your IT staff today to order the server, rack the server, again, assuming physical, rack the server, configure the server, patch the server, lay down the platform, configure it, and then hand off the keys to the actual end user to say, okay, it's now ready, go start adding in your web content or other. And what's the time to value? How much time does it take to actually get out of the red of the cost of the infrastructure versus the time of actually receiving the value the business expected to get for running the infrastructure? Remember, the infrastructure is there to enable people and process to deliver something that generates you revenue or makes you more attractive to your customer. It's not there just to have flashing lights and say, hey, we have petabytes of disk space or really fast processors or lots of RAM. It's to support a business. So from a business side, the cloud to go or no is really, what is your value proposition? What is the ROI expected? And let's pivot for just a second to where IC2 I think goes a lot. Security. What is the cost of data retention on-prem for the next 7 to 10 years as disks change in price and tapes come or go, versus what's the cost of cold storage in a Glacier or an equivalent that says I'm going to pay pennies a month for a monolithic chunk of storage that I'm never going to touch, but if I ever get audited or have a disaster or business continuity requirements, I can go call my cloud provider and say, hey, I need that data back from 3 years ago, and I know I've been paying you pennies a month, but now it's time to warm it back up. And it isn't just about the retention, it's also about data classification. We can't, with these other comments, just go all cloud all the time. We've got to be really intentional. Again, back to customer critical data, back to contracts, back to HIPAA, back to PI. What is the data classification that you want to move to the cloud or not? And you can't say to a judge in a court of law, I'm sorry, but I didn't know that that was somebody's health records or that was somebody's credit card data that wasn't encrypted or was hacked via an HVAC system. So it's not to scare people, but it's to be very intentional about how big is your security team inside of your building as a corporation, how big is the security team of the cloud providers that you're about to go with, and if you do the math, there may be some instances of data classification and retention that you're like, they have 1,000 FTEs on multiple continents watching my data center, which is I'm renting, versus I have a small number of people that need to sleep at night that maybe they get a page, but by the time they wake up to answer the page, log into the RDP or whatever they're using for a remote session, and to go, oh crap, we've been hacked, we've been attacked, the data is gone, and now I'm scrambling with my eyes barely open to solve the problem, versus somebody potentially on your continent or not, wide awake and actively monitoring the queue for what's a blip versus what's an actual attack or something you need to look into. And then we can dive into cost. Is again, back to not just the data retention policies and classifications, but what's the cost of all those disks and tapes? What's the cost of Iron Mountain or some other provider? And what's your availability requirements? Do you truly need 2 nines, 3 nines, 4 nines? Because as we know, to go from 2 to 3 nines, your data center just physical went up by a cost of 10 or more. So to go from 9.9 to 9.9, that $1 million data center may just turn into a $10 million data center. If you truly want to get to 4 nines, it becomes a $100 million data center. And if we really want to get to 24/7, like true 24/7, I don't think any corporation has enough financial capital to go truly secure enough bare metal, because even Amazon, even Azure, even Google, all of the clouds still go down. And that's with a lot of capital invested. So we've really got to look at this holistically, not just security, not just business, not just system cost, but run all of them together through a blender and then determine what is your actual cost versus benefit. And then we're starting to have the right conversation, which isn't just cost, it's all the other whole system view perspectives that determine to cloudify or not. And that's where I think the trend is heading more towards the cloud, because more often than not, it's just a public-facing chunk of data, whether it's your business card, a corporate site, if you will, versus truly the gems of the company. It's your intellectual property that's not even technically an alpha. It's still on some developer's laptop that maybe it does or doesn't go to the cloud, depending on how much you trust other folks. And again, you can take that in a lot of different directions. I'm going to pass it back.
Let's pause on the trust issue for just a moment. There's a lot to unpack in what you said, but I totally get it, right? The cost may not be something that we ourselves can bear, but you spread that out over thousands and thousands of customers for a provider, and it becomes, they get the economies of scale that an individual organization can. I actually have a quote from the same report that I got this very slide from on the growth of cloud. And I thought that this was very interesting. It says that worldwide IT spending is projected to total $3.7 trillion with a T dollars this year. That's a 4.5% increase from 2017. So we are actually spending more and more every year on IT as an enterprise. It's just shifting as to where it goes, it sounds like. It's going more to the provider of the services, especially in the SaaS space, and less of it going internally on-prem. So if we take away the economic conversation, I think we've had some very valid arguments, kind of on all sides of that. And there are areas where you can still gain that economic advantage. But Ryan, you mentioned something, I think it was you that said regarding flexibility. How do we quantify that? Because that seems to be something that if we can convince the business as security professionals that we can enable taking them to the cloud in a safe, sane, and secure way, that we can convince them to do so through the flexibility that it enables the business. Would you agree?
I agree. Some of that flexibility is being able to leverage the economies of scale from the cloud providers in the sense of, DR planning and how you actually respond to those. So if you're working for an SMB and perhaps it was just cost prohibitive for you to have, multiple data centers to be able to fail over from, maybe the East Coast to the West Coast or anything like that, you're seeing that actually happen now in the cloud. So I think as some people jump to the cloud, they might look around and say, hey, there's actually more services that I can purchase that provide more business value and provide a higher level of service and better availability. So I think in some cases, it almost whets the palate for more applications that you're going to be providing your end customers. So I think, and a lot of times, you have that mindset where we're going to say we're going to take apples and move those apples over here, but sometimes you move the apples out to the cloud and you're buying all sorts of apples and oranges and everything like that, and you think, wow, my costs went up. And I think that's sort of what kind of gets the ball rolling for many people.
We touched a little bit on availability and Tom's staggering 10x cost to add that fraction of a point there in the availability. We also talked a little bit about the cheapness of cold storage, right? Ryan, I think that you guys have to maintain a whole lot of records and audit around those records and such around the member base and all of that. How much of a factor is this availability as a potential business driver for cloud services in your decision making there?
So are you talking specifically about the ability to tier storage out?
Yeah, absolutely, because doing so on-prem, to Tom's point earlier, the cost, and even if the cost of moving it out to a different location is sometimes cost prohibitive.
Yeah, if you're backing up to an appliance that's right in your data center, that storage is still sitting on an appliance that's has the same high availability power requirements, same environmental requirements. So you've got all this data, and it's incredibly accessible. And does it have to necessarily be that accessible all the time? Perhaps you can shift to some cloud storage in which you can apply data life cycles to that and have that originally start off in a hotter storage, and then as time goes on, it actually tiers out into colder storage, and that's also going to reduce your price per gig. So I think that's a very beneficial thing where you're able to do archival and backups of stuff that you don't necessarily want to pay that high price point to store if you may or may not need them in the future.
Running with that a little bit further, there's a case where you may store on-prem and then, to his point, tier it out to the cloud that continues to tier to slower and slower versions of getting it back. I mean, it isn't all or anything. It isn't all or nothing. You absolutely could have on-prem storage for, again, that critical IP, those records you need real time that you don't trust to leave, and then as those records become more about legal compliance, then maybe you deep freeze them or tier them down. Because as we know, especially in tech companies, there's a ton of source code from 5 versions ago that you need to have based on legal contracts, but you probably aren't ever going to build them again. So why be eating up your on-prem storage, the actual source code still in development, when you can shove that stuff out until you absolutely need it in call it an emergency patch kind of mode?
No, I think you're dead on and keeping some of that on-prem. What I've noticed, and in doing research for today's conversation, I actually came across, I don't remember the statistics because I didn't think we'd get into this, but it was actually showing how enterprises are paying more for higher bandwidth to get to their cloud providers than they have spent for traditional internet access for the entire enterprise. And I think it's partly driven, Tom, to that exact point of being able to move your data quickly to where it needs to be. And we're seeing a lot of investment being made in the network edge. We're hearing a lot of talk about cloud edge. I was talking to an enterprise just a few weeks ago, and they were looking at moving the applications and data closer to where the population centers were of their users, because more and more users are coming in over mobile and things of that nature. Thoughts on that from an architectural perspective, Tom?
I would say, depending if you're truly on-prem or on-prem via colo. If you're on-prem via colo, there are definitely technology opportunities, not to mention vendor names, that can help alleviate some of that pain, both in latency and in cost. So again, if you're in a colo, definitely call your colo and start asking pointed questions about, hey, what do you have in terms of enabling me to directly connect to the cloud providers in an expeditious, low-cost fashion. And if you're on-prem, like truly your data center is inside of your corporate building or in the back closet, then we got to remember cloud isn't just public cloud. There's private cloud, public cloud, there's hosted, there's SaaS, PaaS, IaaS. You have to rationalize how cloudy is your cloud. Does that make sense where I'm going?
I'm totally going to steal that phrase, but expand upon that cloudiness of the cloud a little bit if you could.
Well, again, back to what you're really trying to do, private cloud might just work fine. You might go toss it on a big monolithic chunk of metal that still allows you to virtualize and have elasticity inside of your building, in which case you're still buying a finite chunk of metal, but within that chunk of metal you can add cores, you can add processing, you can add RAM, you can play with the disk. You have a big chunk of expandability. Now, if that's not good because you don't have a rack in your building somewhere, well then you start looking at things like colo and say, hey, can I go to colo vendor X and can I rent a chunk of rack space to put some of that big metal, and if I run out of rack space, I rent another rack and another rack and another rack, and you use their physical building constraints to allow you to grow that private cloud footprint. And then from there, you then say, okay, well, it's still not big enough, or I still want even more flexibility based on skill set or cost or one of the many variables we talked about, in which case you start saying, okay, let's go to IaaS. Let me go rent Microsoft or Google or IBM or AWS's cloud and let me use their data center, but I'm still going to run the server. I'm still going to be more cloudy. Now I'm trending towards the public cloud, potentially shared tenancy. And then from there you just keep climbing up the stack of, okay, well, I don't even want to have that. I don't even want to be patching my operating system. I want to be focusing on the platform. I just want to run SQL. I just want to run WordPress. I just want to run the business platform, Informatica or other, in which case you move up to PaaS. And eventually you say, well, I don't even want to be configuring the platform. I just want to use it, in which case you go pure SaaS, which is the case there's always configuration, there's always customization. Please don't take any of this as SaaS as a silver bullet, but it continues to move your IT shop's value proposition up the stack, and that's what ensures your viability as an org, because now you're truly an asset to the organization. You're not just a group of folks over on the corner that makes all the lights blink and all the data flow around, but you're sitting down with them at the business table discussing what is it you need to solve. You know, how soon do you need this solved? How long do you need it solved for? And then you can use the cloud or other, again, back to public, private, IaaS, SaaS, PaaS, hosted, etc., to determine, based on what they need, which is the right one for you now. Because it's not a one-size-fits-all. You know, all of them have warts. All of them, just like a rose, has thorns. And you have to determine which thorns are you willing to prick yourself on and pay the cost, whether it's capital expense, operational expense, security, configurability, automation and orchestration. Can you see the log files directly versus you just trust the cloud providers telling you the truth about what was logged? All of this has to be taken into the equation. But you also have to be careful. Don't overanalyze. Do not get stuck in 6 months of analysis paralysis to find out that we could have already solved this thing. We could have already shipped this thing. We could have failed fast, learned fast intentionally. And you can always bring stuff back home if you're careful about it. You know, there's containerization.
Well, that's.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that's sometimes the hardest part is that vendor lock-in. But I want to touch on this with you, Ryan, on that fast failure. Right? As security professionals, we often think of failure as being the worst possible scenario, making itself known. But in Tom's context, right, he's saying experiment. As you talk to other members of the community and such that are embarking on a similar journey of yours, how accepting would you say they are of that mindset of it's okay to make some mistakes as long as we don't lose the data in the process, right? Are they open to that, or is there some resistance there?
I think in many cases they're open to that. It's important to give, especially when you're dealing with new technologies, it's important to give your staff really a safe place to practice technology. And, what we're able to do by failing fast is we're actually able to do proof of concepts significantly faster. What I mean by that is when you're looking at, infrastructure as code or being able to manage your applications through stuff like containers, you can actually test things, see if they work, get them into production, get them out of production, all extremely quickly. And I think that's incredibly helpful.
And I would say if
guys, we've touched. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
If you're intentional about using test data and test data management where you're not loading your production data into these failure environments, you have a really big safety net. It's when you start shoving production data into test POCs or pilots, that's when you might as well just pull out the shotgun and shoot yourself. But if you're intentional about what is the risk profile, what is the probability and actual impact of having the POC go wrong, and you put up guardrails. We always say never use customer data in a POC. Duh. Never use your private data in a test. Duh. Always use abstracted computer-generated data, and then it's fine to go play in these sandboxes. But definitely do not set yourself up for failure. Again, fail fast, learn fast doesn't mean running with scissors. It means running with scissors that have a plastic cover that's stab-proof or cut-proof, if you will.
No, I had to chuckle there because I can't tell you how many organizations I've been in where I get some request for an exception from some dev or somebody who wants to be able to move live data into a test environment. So, that's a lesson that is still being learned. I think it's almost as new generations of IT professionals come up through the ranks, we got to have some fundamentals like that that we continue to educate them on, because I think we're still making those mistakes. But guys, we're halfway through already, and it's been a great conversation. We've talked about a bunch of different non-security related business cases for making the move, everything from availability, not just of the live runtimes, but also the recoverability and the resiliency that offers us through archival and storage and hierarchical storage as well. We've talked a little bit about the flexibility that it affords our business. I think this is a great conversation because it's allowing the security professionals to say, if you do it this way, business, I can help you get these other benefits. But one of the things we haven't touched on yet, and I'd like to kind of flip this around backwards a little bit, is what are some of the security and compliance benefits that we can bring to the table as well, right? So we go in and we say, we're going to help move you to the cloud, and we're going to do so in a secure fashion. But are we going to reduce the cost of security and compliance? Are we going to make it easier? Are we going to limit our blast radius or our exposure? And on that, I'll give you guys an example that I came across through some research with some folks at the University of Connecticut, go Huskies. They'd said that there is a way to actually reduce, if you want to think about it as a tax surface area, if a company acquires another company, they're going to have two sets of accounting systems and probably two sets of, say, ERP systems. The sooner that they can merge those into one set of books, one, they reduce their IT costs. Two, they increase the attack surface area of an auditor or state examiner or whatever the case may be. So as we make these migrations to the cloud, what opportunities are there for improved security and compliance efforts? And Ryan, I'll let you lead off on that one.
Well, as is the case whenever you're building something out new, you really want to plan your security first, and as far as how you're handling the role-based access control. So clouds afford you that fresh slate in which you can kind of put everything on paper as far as what you need to be able to control it, be able to audit what you're controlling and all that. And if you have that framework put together before, it's going to be a lot less painful. Now, oftentimes it's nothing but a credit card separating someone from purchasing their own cloud services. They can do a quick web search, they can find a product that they need, they start a trial, and there it goes. So it adds more complexity as trying to find those shadow clouds as well. But I think as long as you're doing this under the umbrella of a very hardened governance process, I think it becomes easier simply because you're on the ground floor. And then you're able to start leveraging stuff like single sign-on, which is significantly easier to do once you've brought yourself out of your private data center.
You know, we've actually dug into the authentication authorization and the broader identity context here, and I'm glad you brought it up, Brian, because that's a place where I see a huge savings and headache by moving to cloud-related identity services, be a third party from your traditional cloud, like you're using a third-party service, or even going with the cloud's native service as a huge benefit. You know, Tom, I heard you chomping at the bit a little bit there. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, literally right in the exact same vein of what are the capabilities that cloud offers you at a reduced cost that you don't have the capital budget to buy. So for example, what is your SIEM? What's your security information and event management system on-prem today? Did you buy the open source one because it was free, or did you buy the monolithic enterprise one that costed you multiple millions of dollars for the initial license, a couple more $1 million to configure and have the professional services come in and land it, and then hired an army of people to go do? Same with IAM. You know, what is your current footprint, both technologically, process, and people to run your identity access management system? Because when you move some of these and I'm not saying move all, but when you move some of these capabilities to the cloud, back to, yes, there might be an initial just sticker shock of what it's going to cost you, but you're renting a capability. You're renting a potential higher level of maturity than your organization is willing to pay out of pocket, because they may not yet have realized the importance of reducing that threat vector and making sure that you actually have not just the tooling, but the trained professionals. And again, trained doesn't mean you train them once and you forget about it, but are they actively, constantly going through continuing education? You know, do they have a budget that every single year they're at black hat, white hat, etc., saying what are the current trends and how are we going to prevent that new threat vector from attacking us? And then another one I want to throw out there: how much does your organization today spend on certifications? You know, what level of ISO are you certified? What level of SOC are you certified? Because these are not free initiatives. These are very expensive IT, often led things that the benefit is actually huge, but the cloud providers can't have their existence without having all these certifications, because your first question as a security professional should be, show me your SOC 2, show me your ISO 27001, show me your ISO 9001, show me the credentials that say you've been independently verified. And oh, by the way, when was the last time your org did a pen test every unit of time, say 3, 6, 12 months, consistently, versus how often do you think the cloud providers do it? And again, you're renting that capability, you're renting that validation that says they can't exist with a breach. It only takes one cloud provider to get breached once, and not to name a company that may have been hacked a couple of years ago, but we all know what the PR nightmare they went through. Now imagine the PR nightmare of a cloud company being hacked. I mean, they would just shut down. So because of that threat always running, I would say they're going to invest in more security than any of the rest of us ever could, even though we want to.
No, I think I hadn't even contemplated that certification aspect. You know, my previous employer was very interesting because we were dealing with a lot of large contracts with our customers and client base. And I distinctly remember somebody signing off on a contract without it going through my team's review, and it actually said that we would provide them with our SOC 2 every year by a specific date. And a year had come around and they said, where's our SOC 2? And we said, wait, what? We didn't sign up for that. And so that was actually the impetus to move services that were supporting that client's data and efforts into a cloud provider where we could just go to the website for the Trust Center or whatever and download it and email it to them and be done with it. So I think that, and I found out the hard way how expensive those audits are of your data center and how much that annual attestation is. So I think that's another, fantastic point, and one that definitely helps the case. But I'm curious, we've also talked on this program about the shared responsibility model, and the SOC 2 is only going to go so far kind of up that chain. You're still responsible for a lot of this, especially in the IaaS side, and less so in PaaS and such on up to SaaS, where it's almost entirely on the back of the provider, with the exception maybe of some identity and some specific data control. So Tom, at the lower end, if we're early here and we're still in the infrastructure space, it sounds like we're still going to have to bear some of that burden of attestation.
Absolutely, but at least it's shared now. At least it's not just your team. At least you ideally have someone on the other side of the room that has gone through this. They can act as a trusted confidant, a trusted advisor, because remember, it's in their best interest to have you pass that audit, because if you don't pass the audit, you probably aren't going to keep paying them because you aren't going to be in business any longer. You're going to be in breach of contract or other. And it also raises the conversation of that's why you want to move as high up the cloud stack as possible, as pertinent. Because to your point, the further up you go, the more accountability they take on in terms of the pen tests, the threat model assessments, the SOC 2s, et cetera, because you are just renting a capability versus renting a server. And again, I'm not saying go all SaaS, don't go IaaS. It all matters what you're trying to do, because maybe you're building some custom thing, but you truly need access to the OS up because you have a very unique space you're solving for. Or maybe it's just a back office system, it's an ERP, everyone has to do payroll, and you just say, you know what, we're like everybody else, and I just want my people to be paid. And because of that, I'm going to go rent my accounting system, I'm going to go rent my supply chain system. If it's not competitive differentiator, and I'm going to be very clear, there will be some times that competitive advantage is that you own every component of the physical and not just the twiddling the dials on the SaaS or the PaaS.
No, good point. And while we're on the topic of certification, guys, folks, keep the questions coming. We actually had a good question come in about, well, what about our IT folks, right? We talked earlier about some of the skill changes and everything else. Ryan, rumor has it you might know about a cloud security certification or standard we could hold our people to?
Yeah. Let's talk about the CCSP. I mean, it's a great opportunity to make sure that as your team members are swivel chairing between both environments, that they have the skills that they need to do this in a safe and secure manner. And as we sort of talk about the people aspect of that, and Tom sort of touched on this earlier, you know, I think one of the things that we have to be careful of is understanding people sometimes feel like their skill sets may be replaced. The way I like to look at that is we're actually enhancing their skill sets. A lot of this is using established processes through ITIL, and that's not going to change how you approach it. But really, we have an opportunity to invest in those people through certifications, through additional skills, and get them engaged at platforms that help them deliver more value to the business in a faster way. And I think the CCSP is a great way to get that started, if I'm completely honest with you.
You know, go ahead, Tom.
I went through the CompTIA Security Plus one. I know it's a much lighter version than the CSP, but I will say it's amazing how much you learn that you didn't know when you go through these certification programs. And the other thing I want to reemphasize is, I know you could almost argue we're taking a slant towards go cloud and get rid of people. Please don't take that as that. The cloud still requires a monolithic footprint of IT staff because the cloud does not run itself. You still got to configure all the firewalls, you still got to configure all the VPNs, you configure all the zones, you still got to do all the logging, the monitoring. Cloud isn't a hands-off initiative. Cloud still takes absolutely highly paid, highly skilled, highly intelligent IT professionals, but it moves them up the value chain in terms of the amount of work they can do now becomes magnified or a force multiplier versus them sitting down and watching the ones and zeros flowing across the network. So again, please don't take it as a disruptor, take it as a positive asset to all of us.
No, I think that touches on a very important part about the certification and the learning that goes in here, and what you said about it still takes an army of people to do this. Just because you're going to the cloud doesn't mean that your cost benefit comes from ditching your IT staff. Their role is going to change, but I think there's an important lesson here too, that there are so many bits and pieces and nuances to this that are not necessarily a one-to-one match to traditional, shall we say, IT, enterprise IT stack, that you're going to have to make an investment in the people. And, unfortunately, I've talked to a lot of different enterprises where even security leaders have said, I am loath to invest in the training and certification of my people because they will just take it and leave and go someplace else. And I told them that if you invest in your people, they'll have more trust with you and they'll be more inclined to stay. And these people just won't buy it, and it's disheartening for me to watch. Ryan, on the topic of making that investment in the right people to have that move to the cloud be safe and secure, as you mentioned, what kind of advice would you have for folks out there that are probably, early this year now starting to tap into some of their training budget and say, how can I make a case for the training to help my business get there as perhaps a package deal with, say, that move of your, ERP system to a cloud provider or whatever else?
Sure. I mean, just because, a lot of the cloud stuff is point and click doesn't mean it doesn't require certain skills, and doesn't mean that it doesn't require investments in your people. So as you would bring in any sort of new application or new technology, it's very important to make sure that people have a comfort level. And the reason why I brought up that initial fear is they're sort of going into the unknown. I mean, for decades it's been, here's your metal, here's how you manage your metal, and now you're transitioning to, how do I know what value I'm giving if I can't touch, feel, or look at the services I'm providing? So kind of transition them to getting in front of the business, and in order to have that confidence level to go from, out of, maybe a technical bullpen and in front of the customers, I think you really need to make sure that you get that training piece done. And that's the business value that you're going to sell in doing that budget.
And I would say
one of the things go ahead, Tom.
Is you actually become attractive to outsiders that yet don't work in your company, because you're showing to the outside people that haven't hired in, we actually invest in our people. We want our people to have long tenured careers in our organization. We're not just a paper mill of you come in for 6 months and you're out because we didn't invest in you. And a lot of companies forget that investing isn't just a retainer, it's actually an attraction. Because a lot of candidates today will ask, what is the education program? What is the training opportunity? How many conferences do I got to go to? What are you going to do to make the position appeasing to me other than just giving me a paycheck on a regular basis?
Well, let's talk about the business need for that side of this equation, right? One of the frustrations I hear from the cloud adoption side of the people, the IT people and the security professionals that are having to manage this, is that every time they log into the portal, the UI has changed. There's features that are there that they didn't know about that, every week, because the acceleration in delivery of cloud services, features, and capabilities is so fast that they're having trouble keeping up with it. So I think bundling the certifications and education, be it platform specific, like give them some Microsoft training, right, or whatever the case may be, has to go hand in hand with the initiatives to move, because once you get it to the cloud, now you've got to administer it, but that cycle time on features and capabilities is just so fast that I'm finding staff can't keep up. Ryan, what kind of experience have you had after you've made that move with some of the features and enhancements coming out? I mean, how are you guys staying on top of that and maximizing that to get your potential out?
Well, to be fair, I think cloud providers are doing a better job in the past 2 years of letting us know about changes ahead of time. We're able to actually plan for changes in the GUI, the portal, and actually in feature sets that may end up on our endpoints in front of our end users. So in many cases, we're actually finally getting about 30-day heads up as the new features, remove features, and stuff like that. But to be honest, there's always going to be some sort of interesting complexity that a technology brings, and in this case, the cloud. Sometimes that's fast change. But frankly, I'd rather have that be my complexity than having to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and run into a data center and stuff like that. I think it's very well worth that trade-off.
No, I agree. It has improved. Tom, what are some strategies or some thoughts that you have, either for the professionals and practitioners out there or the management layer that's listening here, to cycle their people up on that?
So for me, it all starts with number one, have a cloud strategy. Be intentional. This cannot be accidental. You can't stumble into this. It can't be something some group or manager or director or VP does off the side of the desk. This has to be full transparency, organizational change management driven, to get people to understand why we're even having this conversation is kind of the starting point. Once you have that Step number 2, you have to create a formal cloud enablement team. You have to literally carve people out of their day jobs and say, you are now my cloud security engineer. You are now my cloud architect. Just like we have network engineers, we have software engineers, QA engineers. Cloud needs to become a full-time job because, to your point, it changes so fast. It's like a developer trying to keep up on all of the new languages and the new frameworks and the best practices if they're only doing it 10% of their time. You can't expect them to be successful. And then once you have that strategy and cloud enablement team, the next one is start publishing that roadmap, start having the KPIs and the core success factors, and socialize so everybody knows where you are and you get them off their ladder of inference. Because if you're not transparent, they'll start making assumptions that are wrong, and they're going to go find somebody with the ear of power that has no interest in actually knowing what cloud is, and they're going to shut you down before you even get started. And then all that work is for naught.
No, valid. Guys, time does fly when you're having fun. We got about 9 minutes left. Folks out there in the audience, really appreciate your interaction as well. We had some good comments and such coming through. The questions pane there. Also, people are already starting to give us feedback, gentlemen. When you give us the feedback, please don't just click on X number of stars. Take a moment and jot down your thoughts. Today's program has been a little bit unique. We haven't necessarily focused on a pure aspect of security, but some of the other things that security enables, and perhaps giving you some good insights into how you can better make a business case around some of the transition activities. So give us your thoughts on that. It was a bit of a departure from the norm, and we'd like to hear what you have to say. But with the few moments that we've got left, you guys, what I'd like to do is kind of take a moment, recap some of the interesting points. I've been scribbling notes furiously while we've been chatting here. And it sounds like some of the benefits that we can provide as security professionals is to craft a business case to take certain functions to the cloud. And maybe they're mission critical apps that need availability that we just can't scale. And I think availability, quite honestly, is an underrated aspect of security that we don't take into consideration enough. There's also some compliance considerations, putting things in a space that allows us to get the certifications and the assurances that perhaps our customers, business partners, or our own enterprise requires. Much cheaper, much easier. There's obviously the economies of scale. Tom, I think you talked about some of the, eyes on glass for even just security, but availability and some other elements of the cloud providers, because they've got a lot of reputation riding on it, and they can get a lot more bang for their buck because they're spreading this out across so many customers. Another interesting tidbit I heard was that maintaining a Cmdb with the cloud services is actually much easier than on-prem because it's going to be itemized in your monthly bill. And if we can leverage that of knowing what our stuff is, what our capacity is, it allows some opportunities for planning, for forward-looking, for some elasticity. We talked about the seasonality of business there that I think was a really good remark, that we don't have to overbuy on infrastructure. So some really good stuff going on here, as well as around the human aspect and tying perhaps the ongoing training and development of staff, not only as a means to attract the brightest and best, but also to cultivate them and to bake that into some of these projects as you're making these migrations so that you're sure to carry forward the necessary skill set. So that's just some of the things that we've covered over here in the past 55 minutes. What I want to do now is get kind of some closing remarks from the two of you. If it's something that we didn't touch on that you really wish we would have had more time for, or maybe it's something we did touch on that you were thinking would double down on and perhaps provide a little additional insights. Ryan, I'm gonna go ahead and lead off with you on that one.
Sure. I wanted to touch on just a unique opportunity that this presents for you. One of the biggest operational risks is having knowledge silos. And as you're building this out, you have an opportunity to keep that in mind. And actually, if you can increase your team member engagement during this point and make sure that, as Tom put it, you're transparently doing this and you have a transparent mission and purpose, you have the ability to make sure that everyone is understanding brick by brick what you're building and how it all relates to each other. So think about taking this time and making sure that your documentation processes are looking great. It's just going to get harder as you have faster change. If you don't have those processes hardened, any sort of deviance from those processes will certainly become much more obvious and much more frequent. So it's definitely a very exciting time to be in IT, and I encourage you to plan how you want to do your next cloud project, and make sure that security definitely gets a seat at that table from day one.
Definitely an exciting time to be in IT. Not quite as exciting as when there's an outage, but exciting in a different and more beneficial way. Tom, thanks again for your time, but more importantly, thanks to F5 for bringing you on and giving you the luxury of speaking with us today. We really appreciate that and the continued support of the program. Take us out on a high note, would you?
It'd be my pleasure, and thank you again. This has been really fun for me, and I hope people found it valuable. The things I'd like to reemphasize is, number one, cloud is not just for the developers, it's not just for the network engineers, it's not just for the operations folks. Cloud absolutely positively has to have a seat at the table for the security team, because as you know, as security professionals, it only takes one breach, regardless if it's on-prem, if it's in the colo, if it's in the cloud, that your company will pay the price more than they can calculate on paper. And because of that, you have to find a way, in my opinion, and again, it's just an opinion, as not being seen as roadblocks, but as being seen as advocates for a new world, but done in a way that's intentional, it's proactive, and it's done securely. You're not trying to slow them down to say, hey, cloud is good, cloud is bad. You're just trying to help them to realize that it only takes one mistake and we're on the front page of the newspaper or on the front page of TV and really bad things happen, because it's not just simply an apology when somebody's identity has been stolen, their credit cards have been stolen, their medical records have been stolen, and it's not to go and scare them, but it's to help them realize, again, we're here to help you. We're here to help you go faster. We're trying to prevent you from running into roadblocks that you didn't foresee coming. And if you do that, I think you can be one of their greatest assets in the cloud world and potentially truly be an enabler and expedite this journey with increased success for everyone in the organization.
Wow, fantastic conversation, guys. This has been really eye-opening, and folks listening to us live here today, thanks. You've already taken great time in contextualizing your thoughts around the quality of the program. We really do appreciate it. We take that stuff seriously, and like I said, we're trying something a little new, a little slightly different twist on our regularly scheduled programming here. So that insight's always helpful. We'll use that feedback to generate the next one. Well, on that note, Ryan, Tom, thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedules to prepare and to participate today. It's been a pleasure having you guys on. Until then, everybody, I look forward to continuing the conversation. Take care.